My name is Harper. I'm 32 years old, and I thought I knew what betrayal felt like until the day my entire family sent me a group text that destroyed my world. I was sitting in my office during lunch break, unwrapping the sandwich I'd brought from home, when my phone buzzed with a message that would change everything. The text was cold, calculated, and came from a group chat I didn't even know existed. "We need distance from you. Please stop contacting us completely." But what they didn't know was that I had discovered their real reason for cutting me out, and I wasn't going down without a fight. Before we dive into this incredible journey of family betrayal and ultimate redemption, I'd love to know where you're watching from. Drop your location in the comments below, and don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe for more shocking family drama stories. Trust me, you won't believe what happens next when a family's greed destroys everything they once held dear. 3 months before that devastating text message, my life seemed absolutely perfect in every possible way. I was working as a successful marketing director at a rapidly growing tech startup in downtown Portland, earning a six-figure salary that allowed me to live comfortably in my own apartment. The company culture was amazing. My colleagues respected my innovative campaigns, and I had just landed our biggest client yet, a deal worth over $2 million that would secure my position for years to come. But the real game changer came when my beloved grandmother passed away peacefully in her sleep, leaving me her beautiful Victorian house and a substantial trust fund worth $150,000. Grandma Helen had always been my closest confidant, the one person in my family who truly understood my dreams and ambitions without judgment or criticism. My family dynamics had always been complicated, but I naively believed that blood was thicker than water and that we would always support each other through thick and thin. My parents, Robert and Patricia, lived in the same neighborhood where I grew up, just 20 minutes from my apartment. My older brother Jake worked as a construction foreman and had always struggled financially, constantly borrowing money from our parents and never quite getting his life together despite being 35 years old. My younger sister Madison was a paralegal at a small law firm, ambitious and sharp-tongued, always competing with me since childhood over everything from grades to boyfriends to career achievements. Then there was my cousin Bethany, who lived just a few blocks away from my parents and worked as a real estate agent, someone I had always trusted with my deepest secrets and personal struggles. The first red flag appeared during a family barbecue at my parents' house, just 2 weeks after Grandma's funeral. I had arrived early to help my mother prepare the potato salad when I noticed Jake and Madison huddled together near the garage, speaking in hushed tones that immediately caught my attention. As I approached with a bowl of fresh vegetables, I distinctly heard Jake mention Harper's windfall and something about timing being perfect. When they noticed me approaching, they abruptly changed the subject to Madison's latest dating disaster. But their guilty expressions and nervous laughter told a completely different story. I brushed off the incident as harmless sibling gossip, convincing myself that they were probably just happy about my good fortune and discussing how I might use the inheritance money. However, strange behavior from my family members began escalating in ways that made me increasingly uncomfortable and suspicious. My father started asking detailed questions about Grandma's will, wanting to know exact dollar amounts, investment accounts, and legal procedures that seemed far beyond normal curiosity. My mother suddenly became overly interested in my financial planning, suggesting specific banks and investment advisors with an urgency that felt completely out of character. Jake began making frequent helpful visits to my apartment, always offering to fix things that weren't broken or help with projects I hadn't requested, lingering longer than necessary, and asking to use my computer or bathroom with unusual frequency. Madison would call me almost daily, probing about my inheritance plans and whether I intended to sell Grandma's house, always steering conversations toward money matters with a persistence that made me deeply uncomfortable. The breaking point came during what was supposed to be a peaceful family dinner at my parents' house. While everyone was gathered in the living room watching television after dessert, I went to the kitchen to help my mother with dishes and accidentally knocked over my father's briefcase, spilling its contents across the tile floor. Among the scattered papers, I discovered documents that made my blood run cold and my hands shake uncontrollably. There were photocopies of legal forms bearing Grandma's signature, but the handwriting looked different from her usual careful script. Financial statements showed detailed information about my inheritance that I had never shared with anyone, along with handwritten notes in my father's unmistakable writing, discussing legal challenges and competency evaluations that made absolutely no sense in this context. When I confronted my father about these disturbing documents, demanding an explanation for why he had detailed information about my private financial matters, he dismissed my concerns with a casual wave of his hand and that condescending smile I remembered from childhood arguments. "Oh, sweetheart, those are just some papers Jake brought over from Grandma's old files. You know how disorganized she was toward the end. We're just trying to make sure everything is properly sorted out for tax purposes and estate planning." His explanation felt hollow and rehearsed, like he had been preparing for this exact moment. When I pressed further, asking why he needed copies of documents that were legally mine, my mother quickly intervened, suggesting that I was probably overwhelmed by grief and stress, that losing Grandma had affected my judgment more than I realized. My growing suspicions and sleepless nights filled with anxiety finally drove me to hire a private investigator named Devin Matthews, a former police detective with an impressive reputation for uncovering family fraud cases. Devin was professional, thorough, and reassuring, explaining that financial manipulation within families was far more common than most people realized, especially when significant inheritances were involved. He promised to conduct a discreet investigation into my family's recent activities, financial situations, and any connections to legal professionals or financial institutions that might reveal their true intentions. The retainer fee was substantial, but my peace of mind was worth every penny, and I desperately needed to know whether my paranoid suspicions were justified or if grief was indeed clouding my judgment, as my mother had suggested. Within just 2 weeks, Devin's investigation uncovered a web of deception so elaborate and devastating that I could barely process the information he presented in his detailed report. My father, Robert, had accumulated massive gambling debts totaling over $300,000 to several different creditors, including some very dangerous people connected to underground poker games and illegal sports betting operations. The most shocking revelation was that my brother Jake had been secretly feeding detailed information about my inheritance to these loan sharks, providing them with copies of legal documents, bank statements, and even my daily schedule and habits. Devin had photographs of Jake meeting with known criminal associates, exchanging envelopes, and having intense conversations in parking lots and coffee shops throughout the city. The investigation revealed that Madison had been secretly meeting with lawyers specializing in estate law, specifically discussing strategies for contesting Grandma's will on grounds of undue influence or mental incompetency. She had visited 3 different law firms over the past month, presenting fabricated evidence of my supposed psychological instability and financial irresponsibility. These lawyers were being fed false information about my mental health history, my relationship with Grandma, and alleged incidents of elder abuse or manipulation that were completely fictitious but carefully crafted to sound believable in court. Madison had even gone so far as to contact former boyfriends and college friends, asking leading questions about my past behavior and any incidents that could be twisted to support claims of emotional instability or poor judgment. Perhaps the most betraying discovery was that my trusted cousin Bethany had been systematically recording our private conversations about my inheritance plans, my feelings about Grandma's death, and my future financial goals. Devin had obtained evidence of sophisticated recording equipment in Bethany's purse during family gatherings, along with digital files containing hours of our most intimate discussions. She had been transcribing these recordings and sharing them with my parents and siblings, providing them with detailed intelligence about my emotional state, my plans for the house and money, and my relationships with friends and coworkers. This betrayal cut deeper than the others because Bethany had always been my confidant, the person I trusted with secrets I wouldn't share with my own siblings. The final straw came when Devin discovered that Jake had installed hidden cameras in my own apartment during his helpful visits over the past several weeks. These tiny devices were concealed in picture frames, smoke detectors, and even inside my bedroom lamp, providing my family with complete surveillance of my daily activities, phone conversations, and personal habits. The footage was being stored on a cloud server that Jake controlled, and Devin found evidence that this material was being shared with the entire family group, giving them unprecedented access to my private life. They knew when I left for work, when I came home, who visited me, what I ate for dinner, and even my bedtime routines, creating a level of invasion that felt absolutely violating and terrifying. Armed with this devastating evidence, I decided to confront Madison first, believing that as a paralegal she might be more reasonable and willing to explain the family's motivations without the explosive emotional reactions I expected from my parents. I arranged to meet her at a quiet restaurant downtown, presenting her with copies of Devon's findings and demanding an honest explanation for their coordinated campaign against me. Madison's reaction was not remorse or shame, but pure, unleashed fury that had apparently been building for decades. She screamed accusations across the restaurant table, claiming that Grandma had always loved me more than her other grandchildren, that I was manipulative and selfish, and that I didn't deserve a single penny of the inheritance because I had never truly appreciated our grandmother's sacrifices and unconditional love. "You think you're so perfect with your fancy job and your perfect life," Madison hissed, her voice dripping with years of accumulated resentment and jealousy. Grandma always talked about how proud she was of Harper this and Harper that, while the rest of us struggled and scraped by without any help or recognition. "You don't deserve any of this money. You never visited her as much as you claimed. You never helped with her medical appointments or grocery shopping like the rest of us did. We're the ones who earned this inheritance through years of actual care and sacrifice." Her words revealed a depth of sibling rivalry and family resentment that I had never fully understood, showing me that their current scheme wasn't just about money, but about decades of perceived favoritism and unresolved family dynamics. The most chilling revelation came when Madison admitted that the family had been operating a group chat for months, specifically excluding me while they planned their coordinated strategy to discredit me and claim my inheritance. They had been sharing updates about their individual assignments, celebrating small victories in their campaign, and refining their approach based on my reactions to their various manipulations. This group chat contained detailed timelines, assigned roles for each family member, and even backup plans for different scenarios depending on how I might respond to their pressure tactics. Learning about this secret communication channel felt like discovering that my entire family had been living double lives, pretending to love and support me while actively plotting my destruction behind closed doors. With this devastating knowledge weighing heavily on my conscience and consuming my thoughts both day and night, my family began implementing the first phase of their carefully orchestrated plan to have me declared mentally incompetent and legally unable to manage my own financial affairs. They had consulted with lawyers who specialized in guardianship cases, learning exactly what evidence would be needed to convince a judge that I was suffering from severe depression, poor judgment, and possibly early-onset dementia or other cognitive disorders. The legal threshold for proving mental incompetency was surprisingly low, requiring only documented patterns of erratic behavior, financial irresponsibility, and testimony from family members and medical professionals about my declining mental state. The sophistication of their deception became apparent when I discovered that Jake had been stealing my mail for weeks, intercepting bank statements, legal documents, medical correspondence, and any other official communications that might interfere with their plans. He had apparently copied my mailbox key during one of his helpful visits, allowing him to remove important documents before I ever knew they existed. This mail theft was causing serious problems with my financial accounts, as banks were sending fraud alerts and account notifications that I never received, creating a paper trail of missed communications that could later be used as evidence of my supposed inability to manage basic adult responsibilities. Meanwhile, my mother Patricia was systematically manipulating my former childhood therapist, Dr. Sandra Coleman, who I had seen for anxiety issues during high school over 15 years ago. Patricia contacted Dr. Coleman, claiming to be concerned about my current mental state, describing fabricated incidents of erratic behavior, emotional outbursts, and concerning statements about self-harm or suicide that were completely untrue. Because of patient confidentiality laws, Dr. Coleman couldn't discuss my actual therapy history with my mother, but she could listen to Patricia's concerns and potentially be influenced to write a professional assessment based on these false reports. Patricia was essentially laying the groundwork for expert testimony that would support their claims of mental incompetency. The financial warfare escalated dramatically when I discovered that my business bank accounts had been frozen due to suspicious activity that had been reported to banking authorities by anonymous tipsters who were obviously my family members. These reports claimed that I had been making unusual large withdrawals, transferring money to unknown accounts, and exhibiting signs of being under duress or coercion by unknown parties. The banking investigation required extensive documentation, interviews with bank officials, and legal paperwork that consumed weeks of my time and energy, while preventing me from accessing funds I needed for basic living expenses and business operations. This financial paralysis was clearly intended to create evidence of my inability to manage money responsibly, while also putting enormous stress on my daily life. The situation became even more dire when I lost a major client contract worth over $800,000 due to carefully planted rumors about my mental stability and professional reliability. Someone had contacted my client anonymously, suggesting that I was experiencing a nervous breakdown, that my work quality had declined dramatically, and that the company should be concerned about trusting such an important project to someone with serious personal problems. The client naturally became nervous about the situation and decided to terminate our contract rather than risk their own business reputation, leaving my company in serious financial trouble and damaging my professional reputation throughout the industry. I later learned that Madison had used her paralegal skills to craft these anonymous communications in ways that couldn't be traced back to her directly. My father's desperation reached new heights when he appeared at my apartment one evening with a stack of legal papers claiming that Grandma had actually promised him the house and a significant portion of the inheritance in private conversations during her final weeks. These documents included a handwritten note, supposedly in Grandma's handwriting, expressing regret about leaving everything to me and her desire to ensure that Robert received fair compensation for his years of caring for her. The handwriting looked convincing at first glance, but something about the paper quality and ink color seemed suspicious, suggesting that these documents had been created recently rather than during Grandma's lifetime. Robert's emotional presentation of these papers felt rehearsed and theatrical, with tears that seemed forced and timing that was too perfect to be genuine. However, my first major victory in this escalating war came when Devon's continued investigation uncovered irrefutable proof of Robert's gambling addiction and the falsified documents he was using to support his inheritance claims. Devon had obtained surveillance footage from several casinos, showing Robert losing enormous amounts of money, along with records of his debts to loan sharks and evidence of the forged handwriting on the supposed deathbed note from Grandma. Armed with this evidence, I was able to confront Robert with proof of his criminal activity and threatened to expose his gambling problems to his employer at the accounting firm where he had worked for 20 years. The potential damage to his professional reputation and the possibility of criminal charges for document fraud gave me the leverage I needed to force him to back down from his immediate claims, though I knew this was only a temporary victory in a much larger war. With their financial strategies partially thwarted but their determination unwavering, my family escalated their campaign to complete social destruction, systematically turning every mutual friend, neighbor, and professional contact against me through carefully crafted lies and manipulative storytelling. Madison took charge of this phase, using her natural charisma and convincing presentation skills to spread rumors throughout our social circles about my supposed mental breakdown, erratic behavior, and dangerous tendencies. She would approach people at the gym where we both worked out, at the neighborhood coffee shop where I was a regular customer, and even at local business networking events, expressing fake concern about my well-being while planting seeds of doubt about my stability and reliability. The sophistication of Madison's social manipulation campaign was truly remarkable in its calculated cruelty and psychological insight. She would tell different versions of the same basic story to different people, tailoring each narrative to what she knew would resonate most effectively with each specific audience. To my fitness trainer, she expressed concern about my sudden weight loss and erratic workout schedule, suggesting that I might be developing an eating disorder or substance abuse problem. To my neighbors, She mentioned strange late-night noises coming from my apartment, unexplained visitors at unusual hours, and concerning packages being delivered, implying that I might be involved in illegal activities or dangerous relationships. To my professional contacts, she shared fabricated stories about missed meetings, unprofessional behavior toward clients, and concerning changes in my work quality that suggested serious personal problems. Jake's contribution to this isolation campaign focused specifically on destroying my romantic relationships and poisoning my closest friendships through direct intervention and emotional manipulation. He approached my boyfriend Trevor, whom I had been dating seriously for 8 months and genuinely cared about, with carefully selected pieces of evidence about my supposed unstable behavior and hidden mental health problems. Jake showed Trevor edited recordings of family conversations where I supposedly made concerning statements about self-harm, along with fake text messages that made it appear I was communicating with multiple men and lying about my activities. He convinced Trevor that I was manipulative and potentially dangerous, that my family was genuinely worried about my mental state, and that continuing our relationship could be harmful to his own reputation and well-being. The devastating effectiveness of Jake's manipulation became clear when Trevor broke up with me via text message without any prior warning or discussion, simply stating that he couldn't handle the drama and complications in my life and needed space to focus on his own goals and priorities. The breakup message was cold and dismissive, completely unlike the warm, caring man I thought I knew, suggesting that Jake's evidence had been convincing enough to completely change Trevor's perception of our relationship and my character. Losing Trevor felt like losing my anchor to normalcy and emotional support precisely when I needed it most, leaving me feeling more isolated and vulnerable than ever before. My work performance began suffering dramatically due to the constant stress, sleepless nights, and emotional exhaustion of fighting this multi-front war against people I had loved and trusted my entire life. Concentrating on client presentations became nearly impossible when I was constantly wondering what new attack my family might launch next, checking my phone obsessively for threatening messages or evidence of new schemes. My creativity and strategic thinking, which had always been my professional strengths, were being consumed by anxiety and paranoia about my personal safety and financial security. Colleagues began noticing my distraction and declining work quality, creating additional pressure and professional risks that threatened the career I had worked so hard to build. The psychological warfare reached a horrifying new level when my family staged an elaborate intervention at my parents' house, complete with a hired actor pretending to be a licensed therapist who could provide professional guidance about my supposed mental health crisis. They had researched intervention procedures, hired someone with convincing credentials and professional presentation skills, and prepared emotional speeches about their love and concern for my well-being. The fake therapist presented official-looking paperwork about treatment options, medication recommendations, and residential facilities that could help me recover from my alleged breakdown, while my family members took turns describing fabricated incidents of my erratic behavior and expressing tearful concern about my safety and future. Fortunately, my growing paranoia and suspicion had led me to secretly record this entire intervention session using a small device Devon had given me for protection against exactly this type of manipulation. The recording captured not only their lies and fabricated stories, but also several moments when they broke character slightly, revealing the coordinated nature of their performance and their true motivations. During one particularly telling moment, I caught Jake quietly coaching my mother about specific details she should mention in her emotional speech, and Madison making hand signals to remind the fake therapist about certain talking points they had obviously rehearsed beforehand. The revelation of Bethany's ultimate betrayal came through Devon's investigation into my professional problems and the mysterious loss of several important clients over the past few months. Devon discovered that Bethany had been feeding confidential information about my business strategies, client relationships, and upcoming projects to a competing marketing firm that was systematically undercutting my proposals and stealing my ideas. She had access to this information through our personal conversations and her observations during her visits to my apartment, where she had photographed documents and memorized details about my work projects. This corporate espionage was not only destroying my business but also funding the competing firm's growth while damaging my reputation throughout the industry. The final devastating blow to my professional life came when I lost my job due to performance issues that had been carefully orchestrated through my family's campaign of pressure and sabotage. My supervisor called me into his office with a folder full of client complaints, missed deadlines, and quality control issues that had accumulated over the past several months, most of which I could trace directly to the stress and distraction caused by my family's coordinated attacks. The termination meeting was professional but final, with severance pay and benefits continuation that would last only a few months, leaving me facing unemployment at the worst possible time in my life. Learning that my family had been intercepting my therapy appointments and paying my therapist for confidential information about our sessions felt like the ultimate violation of my privacy and mental health, destroying even my professional support systems in their relentless pursuit of my inheritance. With my professional and personal life in ruins, but my determination stronger than ever, I channeled all my remaining financial resources and emotional energy into fighting back through the legal system with the help of Sophia Reynolds, a brilliant attorney who specialized in complex family fraud cases and had an impressive track record of winning seemingly impossible legal battles. Sophia was recommended by Devon after his investigation uncovered the full scope of my family's conspiracy, and her initial consultation gave me the first real hope I had felt in months that justice might actually be possible. Her calm confidence and strategic thinking provided a stark contrast to the chaos and emotional manipulation that had consumed my life, offering a path forward that relied on evidence, law, and professional advocacy, rather than family loyalty and emotional blackmail. Sophia immediately filed comprehensive restraining orders against all family members for harassment, stalking, financial interference, invasion of privacy, and conspiracy to commit fraud, presenting the court with overwhelming evidence of their coordinated campaign against my well-being and financial security. The legal documentation included Devon's photographic evidence, audio recordings of their admissions, financial records showing their coordination, and expert testimony about the psychological impact of their systematic abuse. The restraining orders were approved quickly due to the compelling evidence, legally prohibiting my family from contacting me directly, approaching my home or workplace, accessing my financial information, or continuing their campaign of harassment and intimidation. Building on this initial success, Sophia filed comprehensive counter-lawsuits for defamation, intentional infliction of emotional distress, financial interference, conspiracy to commit fraud, invasion of privacy, and violation of numerous state and federal laws related to identity theft and financial crimes. The lawsuits sought both monetary damages for the harm they had caused to my reputation, career, and emotional well-being, as well as punitive damages designed to deter future similar behavior and compensate me for the enormous legal costs and personal suffering their actions had caused. The financial demands were substantial, totaling over $2 million in combined damages, but Sophia explained that the evidence was strong enough to justify these amounts and send a clear message about the consequences of such elaborate family fraud schemes. My father's desperation reached truly dangerous levels when he attempted to forge power of attorney documents that would grant him legal authority over my financial decisions, medical care, and property ownership, essentially making me his legal ward, despite my adult status and mental competency. These forged documents were sophisticated enough to fool casual inspection, complete with notary seals, witness signatures, and official-looking letterhead from legitimate law firms. However, Devon's investigation quickly revealed that the notaries had never actually witnessed any signatures, the law firms had no record of creating these documents, and the witness signatures belonged to people who had never met me and had no knowledge of any legal proceedings involving my affairs. Madison's response to our legal offensive involved hiring her own private investigator to dig through my past relationships, college experiences, and employment history, searching desperately for any embarrassing or damaging information that could be used to discredit me in court or force me to abandon my lawsuits out of fear of public exposure. Her investigator contacted former boyfriends, college roommates, previous employers, and even high school classmates, asking leading questions about my character, mental stability, relationship patterns, and any incidents that could be twisted to support claims of erratic behavior or poor judgment. This fishing expedition was both expensive and largely unsuccessful, as most people who knew me well were willing to provide positive character references and defend me against these obvious attempts at character assassination. The situation escalated to actual criminal activity when my apartment was broken into during a business trip to Seattle, with important legal documents, financial records, and personal items stolen in what was clearly a targeted burglary rather than random crime. The burglars ignored valuable electronics and jewelry, focusing exclusively on paperwork related to my inheritance, legal cases, and business operations. Devon's investigation quickly identified Jake as the perpetrator through surveillance footage from neighboring buildings and forensic evidence left at the scene, providing clear proof of his criminal involvement in their ongoing campaign against me. This burglary represented a significant escalation that could result in serious criminal charges and demonstrated the lengths to which my family was willing to go in their pursuit of my inheritance. The court hearing became an absolute battlefield where years of family resentment, financial desperation, and psychological manipulation exploded into public view in front of a judge, lawyers, court reporters, and observers. My father's legal team presented their arguments about my supposed mental incompetency, financial irresponsibility, and the family's genuine concern for my well-being, while Sophia systematically destroyed their credibility with documented evidence of their lies, criminal behavior, and coordinated conspiracy. The contrast between their emotional appeals and our factual evidence was striking, with our presentation relying on recordings, photographs, financial records, and expert testimony, while theirs depended largely on unsupported claims and fabricated stories. Robert's attempt to gain sympathy through a fake medical emergency during the court proceedings backfired spectacularly when court officers recognized the theatrical nature of his supposed heart attack and emergency medical personnel confirmed that his vital signs were completely normal. This obvious manipulation attempt damaged his credibility even further and demonstrated the lengths to which he was willing to go to avoid accountability for his actions. The judge's reaction to this deception was clearly negative, and it became obvious that Robert's legal strategy was failing badly in the face of our overwhelming evidence and professional presentation. The judge's ruling was comprehensive and decisive, finding in my favor on virtually every aspect of our legal arguments and awarding substantial monetary damages while rejecting all of my family's counterclaims and character attacks. The court found clear evidence of harassment, financial interference, invasion of privacy, defamation, and conspiracy, ordering my family to pay significant financial penalties and court costs while permanently prohibiting them from any future contact or interference in my life. However, my family's decision to appeal the ruling meant that this legal battle would continue for many more months, prolonging the stress and uncertainty while preventing me from accessing the financial relief the court had awarded. Just when I thought I had weathered the worst of my family's deceptions and begun to see light at the end of this horrific tunnel, the most devastating betrayal of all was revealed through an unexpected phone call from Evelyn Morrison, the private duty nurse who had cared for my grandmother during her final months. Evelyn had been quietly following news of my legal battles through local media coverage and felt compelled by her conscience to reveal information that would fundamentally change my understanding of everything that had happened. Her voice was shaky with emotion as she explained that she had been carrying the burden of terrible knowledge about my grandmother's final weeks and the manipulation that had occurred in that sacred time when families should be providing comfort and support to their dying loved ones. Evelyn's revelation hit me like a physical blow that left me gasping for air and struggling to comprehend the depth of my mother's manipulation and psychological cruelty. According to Evelyn's detailed account, Patricia had systematically manipulated my dying grandmother over a period of several weeks, filling her ears with elaborate lies about my character, behavior, and feelings toward her. Patricia would visit Grandma daily when other family members weren't present, spending hours describing fabricated incidents of my supposed drug use, financial irresponsibility, and cruel statements about wishing Grandma would hurry up and die so I could inherit her money. These lies were particularly effective because Grandma's medication and declining health made it difficult for her to distinguish between reality and Patricia's fictional narratives. The most heartbreaking aspect of this manipulation was learning that my grandmother's original will had actually left her estate equally divided among all of her grandchildren, treating each of us with the same love and generosity that had characterized her entire life. Patricia had spent weeks convincing the dying woman that equal distribution would be unfair to the family because I was irresponsible and would waste my inheritance on drugs and bad relationships, while my siblings and cousins needed the money more desperately and would use it more wisely. Through persistent emotional manipulation and carefully crafted lies, Patricia convinced Grandma that leaving everything to me would actually be an act of tough love, forcing the rest of the family to unite in helping me manage my supposed problems and addictions. Evelyn explained that Patricia's plan had been breathtakingly calculated and long-term in its scope and psychological sophistication. The goal was never actually to give me the inheritance, but rather to make me the sole beneficiary so that the family could then systematically destroy my credibility, have me declared mentally incompetent, and claim the entire estate through legal guardianship or conservatorship proceedings. By making me appear to be the favored grandchild, Patricia created resentment and jealousy among the other family members while simultaneously setting up the legal framework for challenging my competency to manage the inheritance. The plan required Grandma to die, believing that she was protecting me through tough love, while actually setting me up for complete destruction by people who were supposed to love and protect me. The nurse provided devastating evidence to support her account, including audio recordings she had secretly made during some of Patricia's manipulation sessions with my grandmother. These recordings, which Evelyn had kept as insurance against potential legal problems, captured Patricia's voice describing fictional incidents of my drug use, my alleged statements about hating family obligations, and fabricated conversations where I supposedly expressed contempt for Grandma's old-fashioned values and simple lifestyle. Listening to these recordings was like having my heart torn from my chest. Hearing my own mother systematically destroying my relationship with the person who had loved me most unconditionally, filling her final weeks with worry and disappointment about a granddaughter who had never actually disappointed her in any of the ways Patricia described. Perhaps the most devastating aspect of this revelation was realizing that my beloved grandmother had died, believing that I was a drug-addicted, selfish, ungrateful person who viewed her merely as a source of future wealth rather than as the loving, wise woman who had shaped my values and character throughout my childhood and young adulthood. Grandma's final weeks, which should have been filled with peaceful memories and family love, had instead been consumed with worry about my supposed problems and disappointment about my alleged transformation into someone she wouldn't recognize or approve of. The thought of her lying in that hospital bed, confused by medication and weakened by illness, processing these horrible lies about me, and feeling heartbroken about my supposed betrayal of everything she had taught me, was almost more than I could bear. This revelation triggered the darkest period of my entire life, a psychological crisis that brought me closer to suicide than I had ever been before or since. The weight of understanding that my grandmother had died disappointed in me, combined with the ongoing stress of legal battles and family warfare, created a perfect storm of despair and hopelessness that consumed every aspect of my mental and emotional well-being. I spent days in bed, unable to eat or sleep properly, replaying every conversation I'd ever had with Grandma and wondering what I could have done differently to protect her from Patricia's manipulation. The guilt was overwhelming, even though I intellectually understood that I couldn't have prevented something I didn't know was happening. My suicide attempt was stopped only by Devon's intuitive decision to check on me after I had failed to respond to calls and text messages for over 24 hours. He found me unconscious in my bathroom, surrounded by empty pill bottles, and called emergency services immediately while performing CPR until paramedics arrived. The hospital stay that followed was a blur of medical procedures, psychological evaluations, and slowly growing awareness that I had nearly let my family's evil actions destroy not only my life, but also any chance of honoring my grandmother's true memory and love. Devon's quick thinking and genuine care had literally saved my life, giving me the opportunity to fight back against their lies and reclaim both my inheritance and my grandmother's legacy. During my recovery, Devon became more than just my private investigator. He became my anchor to sanity and hope, helping me understand that my grandmother's manipulation was not my fault, and that Patricia's actions were the ultimate betrayal of everything families should represent. Devon's steady presence, professional competence, and genuine caring provided the emotional support I needed to channel my grief and anger into determination to expose the truth and ensure that Patricia's manipulation would never harm anyone else. His investigation skills, combined with Evelyn's evidence and testimony, gave us the tools we needed to not only clear my name, but also reveal the true scope of my family's conspiracy and cruelty to the legal system and public record. The revelation of Patricia's manipulation of my dying grandmother became the catalyst for my complete transformation from victim to strategic fighter, channeling my grief and rage into a methodical campaign to expose their crimes and reclaim not only my inheritance, but also my grandmother's true legacy and memory. Working closely with Devon's investigative expertise and Sophia's legal knowledge, I developed a comprehensive strategy that would not only clear my name, but also ensure that my family faced serious consequences for their elaborate fraud scheme and elder abuse. The evidence we had gathered was overwhelming, but I wanted to make sure that every aspect of their conspiracy was documented, and every crime they had committed was properly prosecuted to the fullest extent of the law. Devon's investigation had uncovered connections between my father's gambling debts and organized crime figures that opened up entirely new avenues for legal action and federal involvement in our case. The loan sharks who had been pressuring Robert for payment were part of a larger money laundering operation that was already under FBI surveillance for various federal crimes, including racketeering, tax evasion, and illegal gambling operations. When Devon shared our evidence with federal authorities, they became very interested in Robert's role as both a victim and willing participant in these criminal activities, particularly his involvement in providing them with detailed information about my assets and inheritance for potential collection purposes. My strategic decision to cooperate fully with the FBI investigation, providing testimony and evidence about the loan shark operation in exchange for federal protection and support in prosecuting my family's crimes, marked a turning point in my fight for justice and personal recovery. The FBI was particularly interested in Jake's role as an intermediary between Robert and the criminal organization, as well as his involvement in illegal surveillance, mail theft, breaking and entering, and other federal crimes that had occurred during their campaign against me. My cooperation provided federal authorities with inside information about the criminal network's operations, while giving me powerful allies with resources far beyond what private lawyers and investigators could provide. The systematic collapse of my family's elaborate conspiracy began with Robert's arrest on federal charges of money laundering, racketeering, and conspiracy to commit fraud, charges that carried potential sentences of decades in federal prison, and the complete destruction of his reputation and financial security. His arrest was conducted with maximum publicity, occurring at his workplace in front of colleagues and clients, ensuring that his 20-year career at the accounting firm was immediately terminated and his professional reputation was destroyed beyond repair. The federal charges also triggered immediate seizure of his assets, including his house, retirement accounts, and personal property, leaving him facing not only criminal prosecution but also complete financial ruin. Jake's attempt to flee the state when he learned about my FBI cooperation and his father's arrest only made his legal situation worse, turning him from a local criminal defendant into a federal fugitive and triggering nationwide manhunts and additional federal charges for flight to avoid prosecution. His panicked escape attempt revealed the true extent of his guilt and fear, while also demonstrating to federal prosecutors that he represented a flight risk who needed to be held in custody without bail once he was captured. The additional federal charges related to his flight added years to his potential sentence and ensured that he would face serious prison time regardless of the outcome of the original fraud and harassment charges. Madison's legal career was completely destroyed, when ethics investigators discovered her involvement in filing false legal documents, subornating perjury, and using her paralegal position to access confidential legal resources for personal criminal purposes rather than legitimate client representation. The State Bar Association not only terminated her paralegal license, but also forwarded her case to criminal prosecutors for potential felony charges related to the unauthorized practice of law and legal fraud. Her law firm immediately terminated her employment and cooperated fully with investigators to avoid any suggestion that they had knowledge of or participation in her criminal activities, leaving her facing both criminal prosecution and complete professional ruin. Meanwhile, my business recovery exceeded every expectation I had dared to hope for during the darkest days of my family's campaign against me. Using my inheritance money strategically, I launched my own marketing consultancy with a focus on helping businesses recover from reputation damage and family-related scandals, drawing on my own experience with crisis management and public relations challenges. My first major client was ironically a family-owned company that needed to rebrand after their own internal scandal involving financial fraud and family disputes, allowing me to apply the lessons I had learned from my own situation to help others navigate similar challenges. The success of my new business venture was both professionally satisfying and personally healing, proving to myself and others that my family's attempts to destroy my reputation and capabilities had actually made me stronger and more resilient than ever before. Within 18 months of launching my consultancy, I had 15 employees, office space in downtown Portland, and a client list that included major corporations seeking help with crisis management and reputation recovery. Industry publications began featuring articles about my innovative approach to family business consulting and crisis communications, establishing me as a recognized expert in a specialized field that had grown directly from my personal experiences with family fraud and manipulation. 2 years after receiving that devastating group text message that had initially destroyed my world, the landscape of my family's life had been completely transformed by the consequences of their own criminal actions and moral failures. Robert was serving a federal prison sentence of 12 years for money laundering, racketeering, and conspiracy charges, effectively ending any possibility of a comfortable retirement and ensuring that he would emerge from prison as an elderly man with no financial resources, professional reputation, or family support system. The federal conviction had also resulted in the complete seizure of his pension, Social Security benefits, and the family house, leaving Patricia homeless and dependent on public assistance for basic survival needs. Jake's eventual capture and prosecution had resulted in a federal sentence of 8 years for his role in the conspiracy, along with additional state charges for breaking and entering, mail theft, invasion of privacy, and numerous other crimes that would keep him in various correctional facilities for well over a decade. His construction career was obviously finished. His personal relationships had been destroyed by the publicity surrounding his criminal activities, and his financial situation was hopeless due to legal fees, restitution orders, and complete unemployment prospects upon his eventual release. The young man who had once been my protective older brother had become a cautionary tale about how greed and family resentment could destroy every aspect of a person's life and future prospects. Madison's situation was perhaps the most pathetic of all, as her legal career and professional identity had been completely destroyed, leaving her working minimum-wage retail jobs while facing ongoing criminal prosecution and professional sanctions that would prevent her from ever working in legal fields again. Her law school education, paralegal training, and years of professional experience had become completely worthless, as no legal employer would risk hiring someone with her criminal record and ethics violations. The ambitious, sharp-tongued woman who had once competed with me for every achievement was now struggling to afford basic necessities while living in a studio apartment and facing the constant stress of ongoing legal proceedings. Patricia's decline was both the most dramatic and the most heartbreaking to witness, as the stress and guilt of her actions had apparently triggered early-onset dementia that left her confused, frightened, and largely unable to care for herself independently. Whether her cognitive decline was genuine or partly performed to avoid criminal prosecution was unclear, but medical evaluations confirmed significant memory loss and psychological deterioration that required placement in a state-funded assisted living facility. The woman who had orchestrated the elaborate manipulation of my dying grandmother was now herself dependent on the care of strangers, experiencing the confusion and vulnerability she had exploited in Grandma's final weeks. Bethany's desperate attempt to reconnect with me after witnessing the complete destruction of the rest of our family was both too little and too late, as her previous betrayals had permanently destroyed any possibility of trust or meaningful relationship between us. Her phone call came during one of my business meetings, with tears and apologies that felt genuine, but could never undo the damage she had caused through her systematic recording of our private conversations and corporate espionage activities. During this conversation, she revealed additional family secrets that further demonstrated the depth of their conspiracy, including the fact that she had been stealing small amounts of money from Grandma's purse during visits, and had been the one who suggested to Patricia that Grandma was becoming mentally vulnerable and susceptible to manipulation. The final confrontation with Patricia occurred in the sterile, antiseptic environment of her assisted living facility, where I found a woman who bore little resemblance to the mother I had known throughout my childhood and young adulthood. Her hair was thin and unkempt, her eyes were vacant and confused, and her hands shook constantly as she struggled to recognize me during our brief visit. When moments of clarity did surface through the fog of her declining mental state, Patricia would become tearfully emotional, expressing regret and confusion about events she could only partially remember. Her whispered confession, delivered in broken sentences and interrupted by periods of confusion, revealed that she had convinced herself that destroying my relationship with Grandma was somehow an act of family protection. "I thought if you suffered like we did, you'd come back to us," Patricia whispered through her tears during one of her clearer moments, revealing the twisted logic that had driven her manipulation campaign. "Your father's gambling was going to destroy everything, and Jake was in trouble with those dangerous people, and Madison was so angry about always being second best to you. I thought if we could just get Grandma's money, we could fix all our problems and be a real family again. I thought you were strong enough to handle it, and that once everything was settled, you'd forgive us and we'd all be together again." Her explanation revealed not only the financial desperation that had motivated their actions, but also a fundamental misunderstanding of family love and the irreversible damage that betrayal and manipulation caused to relationships. The most devastating aspect of this final conversation was Patricia's admission that the family had never actually loved me as an individual, but had always resented the favoritism they perceived in Grandma's treatment of me, compared to the other grandchildren. "She did love you more," Patricia said with brutal honesty during one of her lucid moments. "She talked about you differently, worried about you differently, planned for your future in ways she never did for Jake or Madison or Bethany. We all saw it, and we all felt left out and overlooked. I guess we thought that if we could take away what made you special to her, maybe she'd finally see the rest of us the way she saw you." This revelation explained not only their current conspiracy, but also years of subtle family dynamics that I had never fully understood, showing that their recent actions were the culmination of decades of accumulated resentment and jealousy. Learning that my family had never truly loved me for who I was, but had always seen me as an obstacle to their own relationships with Grandma, was perhaps more painful than all their recent criminal actions combined. It meant that my entire childhood and young adulthood had been built on false foundations, that the family bonds I had treasured and tried to protect were actually sources of resentment and competition rather than genuine affection and support. The family dinners, holiday celebrations, birthday parties, and shared experiences that had formed my understanding of love and belonging were revealed to be performances motivated by obligation and social expectations, rather than authentic emotional connections. 3 years after that life-changing group text message that had initially felt like the end of my world, I found myself living a completely transformed life that exceeded every dream and aspiration I had ever dared to imagine during the darkest days of my family's betrayal and conspiracy. My business had grown beyond a simple consultancy into a comprehensive crisis management firm with offices in 3 cities, over 40 employees, and a client roster that included Fortune 500 companies, high-profile individuals, and family-owned businesses facing their own internal scandals and reputation challenges. Industry magazines regularly featured articles about my innovative approaches to crisis communications and family business mediation, establishing me as a nationally recognized expert whose personal experience with family fraud had become professional expertise that helped others navigate similar challenges. The personal transformation in my life was even more remarkable than my professional success. Beginning with my marriage to Devin Matthews, the private investigator whose skilled work and genuine caring had literally saved my life during my darkest moments. Our relationship had evolved naturally from professional cooperation to deep friendship to romantic love, built on mutual respect, shared experiences with overcoming adversity, and complete trust in each other's character and commitment. Devin understood the trauma I had experienced in ways that no one else could, having witnessed firsthand the elaborate conspiracy that had nearly destroyed me, while I appreciated his dedication to truth and justice that went far beyond professional obligations to genuine personal investment in my well-being and recovery. Our new home was a beautiful colonial house in a quiet neighborhood 30 miles from where my family had lived, far enough away to provide psychological distance from painful memories, while close enough to maintain my business connections and professional relationships in the Portland area. The house represented not only financial success but also emotional healing, with bright, open spaces that felt completely different from the cramped apartment where I had lived during the worst periods of family harassment and surveillance. Every room was decorated with items chosen for beauty and comfort rather than practical necessity, creating an environment that reflected joy and peace rather than survival and protection. My approach to therapy and healing had become both personal practice and professional expertise, as working with other families facing similar crises had taught me that my experiences, while uniquely painful, were part of larger patterns of family dysfunction and financial manipulation that affected thousands of people every year. Regular sessions with Dr. Rebecca Harrison, a trauma specialist who understood complex family abuse situations, had helped me process not only the specific betrayals I had experienced, but also the deeper questions about trust, family bonds, and personal identity that arose from learning that my childhood understanding of family love had been largely illusory. The philosophy that guided both my personal recovery and my professional work could be summarized in a simple but profound truth that had taken years of pain and growth to fully understand. Blood doesn't make family, loyalty and love do. This realization had freed me from the guilt and obligation I had felt toward people who had systematically betrayed and harmed me, while opening my heart to authentic relationships with people who demonstrated genuine care and commitment through their actions rather than just their words. My chosen family now included Devin, my employees who had become close friends, clients who had become mentors and supporters, and a growing network of people who valued integrity and mutual support over biological connections and social expectations. My pro bono work helping other families navigate similar financial fraud situations had become one of the most meaningful aspects of both my business and personal life, providing free consultation and legal support to people who couldn't afford comprehensive crisis management services but desperately needed expert guidance and emotional support. These cases reminded me regularly of how fortunate I had been to have sufficient financial resources and professional connections to fight back effectively against my family's conspiracy, while many victims of family fraud lack the means to protect themselves or seek justice. Through partnerships with legal aid organizations and victim advocacy groups, my firm provided reduced-cost services to hundreds of families dealing with elder abuse, inheritance fraud, and family manipulation schemes. The transformation of Grandma's Victorian house into a safe haven for elder abuse victims represented both practical community service and deeply personal healing, converting the property that had been the center of so much family conflict into a resource that honored my grandmother's memory through genuine care and protection for vulnerable elderly people. The house now served as temporary housing for seniors who had been financially exploited by family members, providing them with safe, comfortable accommodation while legal and social service professionals worked to resolve their cases and establish permanent protective arrangements. Every month, I received letters from residents and their families expressing gratitude for this resource, confirming that Grandma's legacy was now serving others in ways that would have made her genuinely proud and happy. The final test of my emotional growth and boundary setting came when I received a birth announcement from Madison, who was apparently desperate enough for reconciliation that she was willing to reach out despite the restraining orders and legal restrictions that officially prohibited contact between us. The announcement was accompanied by a handwritten note expressing regret about our family situation and hope that the birth of her daughter might provide an opportunity for healing and rebuilding relationships that had been damaged by misunderstandings and poor decisions. The language was carefully chosen to avoid admitting guilt, while suggesting that our estrangement was the result of mutual mistakes rather than her deliberate criminal actions and betrayal. My response to Madison's attempt at reconnection was measured and appropriate, reflecting the healthy boundaries I had learned to maintain, while also acknowledging our shared humanity and the possibility of redemption for people who genuinely changed their behavior and attitudes. I sent a beautiful baby gift to the hospital, along with a brief note congratulating her on her daughter's birth and wishing the child health and happiness, but I maintained my no-contact policy and did not provide any information about my current life or suggest any possibility of future relationship. This response felt authentic and appropriate, showing kindness without vulnerability, generosity without enabling, and acknowledgement without reconciliation. As I sit here today, reflecting on this incredible journey from victim to survivor to thriver, I am filled with gratitude for the strength I never knew I possessed, and the wisdom that came from facing my worst fears and deepest pain with courage and determination. The family that tried to destroy me ultimately gave me the greatest gift possible by showing me who I really was beneath their expectations and manipulations, forcing me to develop independence, resilience, and authenticity that might never have emerged in a more comfortable situation. Their betrayal taught me to value genuine love over convenient relationships, integrity over family loyalty, and personal truth over social expectations. The most important lesson from this entire experience is that sometimes the people who hurt us most deeply are actually doing us the greatest favor by revealing their true character and forcing us to develop our own strength and wisdom. My family's elaborate conspiracy failed not because they lacked intelligence or commitment, but because their actions were fundamentally based on lies, manipulation, and selfishness that could never create lasting success or happiness. My victory came not from superior strategy or resources, but from my commitment to truth, justice, and authentic relationships that could withstand scrutiny and legal examination. I stopped trying to be the daughter, sister, and niece they wanted me to be, and instead became the woman I was meant to be: independent, successful, loving, and free from the toxic dynamics that had defined my family relationships for my entire life. The woman writing these words today bears little resemblance to the confused, hurt person who received that devastating group text message 3 years ago, but she carries within her all the strength, wisdom, and compassion that grew from that terrible experience. Have you ever experienced betrayal from people you trusted completely? How did you find the strength to rebuild your life when everything you believed was revealed to be false? Share your stories of overcoming family manipulation and financial fraud in the comments below. Your experiences might help someone else who's facing similar challenges right now. If this story touched your heart or taught you something valuable about family dynamics and personal strength, please hit that like button and subscribe for more true stories about overcoming adversity and building authentic success. Don't forget to share this video with anyone who might benefit from hearing about resilience, justice, and the power of choosing your own family based on love and loyalty rather than blood and obligation. Thank you for listening to my story with open hearts and minds, and I wish you all the courage to build lives filled with genuine love, authentic relationships, and the kind of success that comes from staying true to your values, even when the people closest to you try to destroy everything you've worked to build.